Hey everybody, this is Dominic DeAngelo of OneTrueSport.com and SEScoops.com as well. But I'm very happy to have with me here my first ever time interviewing this person, and grew up a fan of his, admired him for many of his matches and the work ethic he puts in and the attitude he approached pro wrestling. It's Bret the Hitman Hart. Bret, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to join in, especially to talk a little bit about my late great friend Leo Burke.
Absolutely, and yes, as I told you off air, I first learned about Leo Burke from you, like reading your book, the autobiography, and you mentioned what really sparked me was like it mentioned in the book how he looked like Burt Reynolds, and I was like, oh, I love Burt Reynolds. And I was like, I gotta Google this guy once I'm done reading. And then, unfortunately, in July, he passed away this past summer. And you post a really beautiful message about him and the impact that he left on the business. And after the fact that I went and I watched one of his matches that he had, him versus Rick Martel in Halifax at the Halifax Forum, July 3rd of 1984. And something that you were talking about was ring psychology and stuff like that. And when I watched this match, he made the headlock so entertaining. And and that's something that I really took away. The guy was able to do that so well, and it speaks to the talent that he had. But I wanted to get your first thoughts about what were your first impressions of him when you met Leo.
Well, I'm like a Leo Burke historian, really. I watched him. He came up to Calgary when I was a little kid. I'm trying to think. It was probably 1966, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere around that range. I know I was about 6 years old, and he came up, and he was debuting my dad's opening night when he had all his new wrestlers for the season. It was quite a big night, and I was selling programs and all that. He came down, and he was dressed as Batman, and he was wrestling that night as Batman. And to give you an idea, Batman, the TV show that little kids like me were watching back then, it just aired that week, the first episode.
Yeah.
Car coming out of the fiery hole and all that.
Yeah.
I became a Batman freak after 1 week. And then when I saw Leo Burke as Batman, I was pretty pumped. It was like, I was like, he's not a Superman. Can't be a Superman. Can't be the real guy. But I didn't know. I was pretty young. Anyway, he went out and got butchered. He got this, he was just a job guy.
Yeah.
And he just got annihilated. And I was so embarrassed. It was like, I couldn't believe Batman let himself get beat so bad. And he was just a job guy. And the next week, he got slaughtered again in the first match or something like that. I can't remember who he wrestled. But I remember after about 3 weeks, he was just a good guy that came out. Suddenly he came out, he's no mask anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The Batman thing died, which was funny because I would always tease him about Batman for forever. It was like a lame gimmick that he realized about 3 weeks in that it was more than helping him, and he got rid of it. But I would always bring it up. I remember like even Bobby and Rudy would always give you a nudge to bring up the great gimmick of Batman.
The great gimmick of Batman.
just missed the mark, just didn't quite, and it was always funny. But so I knew Leo when he first started, and I watched him from day one. And he was always pretty good. I mean, I believed in Leo Burke. Like, he could do good drop kicks. He could do, right from day one. I mean, I'm watching him right when he came out of the chute.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Beast was up here. He was the top heel. And then they worked some angle where somebody broke Leo's neck or something like that. And then the Beast came out that it was his little brother that got hurt. He was going to get revenge on whoever it was that did it. But it was a pretty good angle at the time. Mm-hmm. Leo was just a young guy. And I remember Bobby. I don't know if Bobby was here yet. I don't know if he was wrestling yet. I think Leo was the baby still at that time. Leo, to give you an idea, I think he was 18 years old.
Wow.
That's how far back it was. So, and that's what I kind of remember about Leo is that he was up here, and back in those days, a lot of the wrestlers from the Maritimes would just shoot up to Calgary to till the summer, and then they'd all, go back to the Maritimes and pick up where they left off. Like it was like they were perfectly timed. As soon as you finish in the Maritimes, you go up and work for Stu Hart, Calgary, and then when you finish there, you go back to the Maritimes. You just go back and forth.
Oh,
so that's what a lot of guys did. So Leo and Bob Sweetan and a lot of guys from those days, they all just went back to the Maritimes. And Leo and his brothers, I think, were part of the promotion.
Mm-hmm.
They had their own promotion going there for a while, and then eventually, I think they had teamed up with Emile Dupree, who was also promoting at the same time. I don't know all the history there, exactly what was going on with who's right to what promotion and stuff like that. But I know that Leo and his brothers, they booked the Maritimes.
Mm-hmm.
For a period of time there. I know I was probably just a kid growing up watching wrestling here in Calgary. And Leo, I think, started working with better wrestlers. He clearly went up a couple of notches.
Yeah.
But he would come back to Calgary and be like, holy shit, Leo Burke's a whole different wrestler than he was last year.
He's
and
not
then
that
he would come back the next year, and he just kept getting better and better.
Mm-hmm.
And more likable. Like, I always liked him. He had a good personality, came across as, and when you got an autograph from him at intermission, he always seemed like a fun guy and a good guy. And I liked Leo Burke as a little kid, and as I grew older, he got more and more prominent in my dad's promotion, where eventually I think he was a big part of the show all the time. Even though he wasn't necessarily running the show, he was the guy that had a lot of input. Tell my brother and my dad what we should do tonight and match, and they would just do what Leo said. Leo had a lot of, always had good insight, and whatever he thought was a good idea was usually a good idea. So everyone listened to him and trusted him. And when I got into the business, I was a referee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he was on top, and he was. Really in the beginning when I started refereeing, I had no aspirations to become a wrestler. If anything, I was glad that it was a part-time thing. I only had to do it. I didn't have to do it on TV.
Right.
And I could do it away from home, and no one would ever know. None of my friends. I didn't want anyone to know I had ended up as a pro wrestling referee. But anyway, as a referee, getting the finishes every night on say 7 or 8 matches on the card.
Right.
And it's like I would go, Leo would give me the finishes all the time and tell me that in those days, or most of the time, there was 2 separate dressing rooms, like on one side and then the other side of the building. So the wrestlers were unable to communicate with each other unless they couldn't even sneak over because the fans are right outside the dressing room doors and stuff like that. So it was pretty difficult to communicate. So a lot of wrestlers would communicate a little bit on the trips driving in. They'd figure out a lot of stuff. But it was my job to kind of, like Leo would say, go back and tell Don Gagne that this is what we're going to do. And it would be my job to sort of take it word for word and take it back and explain it to the good guy, or the bad guy, what Leo wanted him to do.
Mm-hmm.
But that process taught me so much. Like, I learned so much just explaining it and seeing the light go off in the other wrestler's head. Like, okay, I got that. Yeah, we did that in Edmonton or something. It was always like, I would always like listen to his explanation of what he wanted done and see that, and then watch it executed in the ring.
Wow.
And it was, for me as a guy learning the business, it's like, so that's how it works. Like, that's how I learned sort of the deep down, I think Leo would be backing you up and go, okay, don't, check my fist or check my hand, or, like, he would always tell you stuff to do that was always really timely. Like a movie director. He was the guy that made it all make sense. And when you refereed, like when I refereed for Leo,
mm-hmm.
I could feel right away that I started to understand the business. And then later on, not long after that, is when I got approached about training to become a wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did become a wrestler. But Leo was such a big part of that step towards doing it, because I saw how much fun it was just to do it the way Leo was doing it, like calling it, explaining, like, you know, he was just so, you know, he always made so much sense when he explained it to you.
Right, yeah.
You know, and it was like, God, that's perfect. That's right. And you watch him execute, especially with really good workers like Frenchie Martin and, you know, Bobby Bass and guys that he worked with. Leo could tear the house down and have the place just going crazy. And it was like, that's how you do it. That's how this is the kind of guy you got to watch. You got to learn from this guy. He was so ahead of the curve. And I think the professionals back in those days, be it Ric Flair, Nick Bockwinkel. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot of guys I can think of that I thought were just great workers.
Yeah.
But none of them, including Nick Bockwinkel or Harley, or Ric Flair, I would say Leo Burke was for sure the most technically logical. Like the stuff he did, the timing of everything he did. Like I remember I had a match with Leo, you know, once my career kind of started. Mm-hmm. Leo had come back from the Maritimes and was a big part of my learning right away the wrestling. I did to Puerto Rico and come back, and Leo was always very reassuring. Like he always come up and say, "Geez, you're getting a little bigger," you know.
Yeah.
Or you had a good match. I liked your match, or you did this good. I like the way you know. And he would always make me feel like appreciate my work rate. Like at a time when it's like you're just trying to do a headlock, okay, you know.
Right.
But he was really a wise guy to listen to. Like almost everything he said was right. I don't remember ever going, that doesn't make sense, Leo. Like everything he said was so dead on. But I do remember having a match with him. Mm-hmm. This is maybe my first year in the business. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. I do remember what happened. I know I was, I was wrestling Leo in a babyface match. Uh-huh. I may have won the title from him the night before, or the week before. I'm not sure who was champion at the time, but we had a pretty good. In fact, we had some absolutely beautiful matches together. Really, really solid, really believable, and I remember he called abdominal stretch for me to like come off the ropes and take an abdominal stretch, like and end up in one where he's going to put me in the abdominal stretch. Uh-huh. Or it might have been the other way around. I can't remember, but I do know that when we sort of, you know, you hook in with your legs and you try to spin around a little bit.
Yeah, right.
When he kind of hooked in with me, he was trying to swing his arm through, like and get him like as quick as he could to put to hook my arm over his head kind of thing. He gave me an elbow smash forearm with the full brunt of his elbow. Uh-huh. Like an elbow smash in the face. And he hit me right between my front teeth and my nostrils. Oh. Absolutely as hard as he could. And it almost knocked me out. And I went down and my nose was, well, it wasn't broken. It was like, because it hit me kind of going up. Like it was more like getting kicked in the nose. Like it was like a really hard blow.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Coming up. Mm-hmm. And I went down in both nostrils. It was like I turned a big tap on with blood. Just poured blood right out of my nostrils. And I remember like Leo got up and I'm not sure who you could say whose fault it was. I think it was just one of those accidents.
Yeah.
Really, really fast. And, but I remember he just pushed me over on my back, and I remember he goes, "Might as well get some mileage out of it." And I watched him. He kind of stood up on one knee, and I remember lying there in the middle of the ring, looking up and going, "Oh my fucking god! Like, he is gonna drop a knee on my face." And he dropped the most perfect knee on my face, and I sold the hell out of it, and the place went crazy, and we just tore the house down with that match, and we worked the blood all with. I mean, it never stopped bleeding the whole match. It was like two running sinks, and it was so real. Like when I look back, it was like, you know, once it was done.
Yeah.
And everything he did to my nose to work my nose was so safe. Like he never touched. He put me in a headlock and give me one of those Ric Flair type punches where you can see the fist right almost touching my nose.
Wow.
But he would never touch. He was such a great worker, such a great psychologist, and I just read, like when I had that happen with my nose, I was never mad about it.
Mm-hmm. That's the name of the game. Yeah.
I say that knowing that it was sad and like funny. The next week I was working in a match with a guy named Dirty Duke Myers, was the guy that just came in working for my dad in those days.
Uh-huh.
But I'd never seen him before. And so we didn't know if he was any good or not. So we had to put him in the main event. Cold was me in the main event because there was nobody else for me to work with at that time. I was the champion. So they threw me in with him. And this is 1 week after I wrestled Leo.
Mm-hmm.
And we had Cass and Boo, this black wrestler, hit the ring and attack me as I was making a comeback, and then just slam me. And then he was supposed to hit the ropes and drop an elbow drop on me, because then it would be him and me the next week fighting each other.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, anyway, I just remember Casabuba came in, jumped me, body slammed me on the ground, backed up kind of like Abdul, where he used to lean into the rope.
Mm-hmm.
He was a big 300 or 400 pound guy. And a great guy. He's one of my best buddies in those days. I really loved Casabuba. He was a really friendly, great guy. And anyway, he leaned into the ropes and came up for a big elbow drop on me. I remember he gave me one, and it was perfect.
Yeah.
And then he stood up and he stood over me. And I think when we worked out in the dressing room, I said, "Just give me one elbow. That should be enough." And I'm lying there, and I'm dead. And Casabuba looks at me and he kicks my arm out of the way again, kicks it so he won't land on it. And he leans back and falls back into the ropes again, going backwards. And then he's coming off the ropes. And I'm lying on the mat, and I can see his running shoe get hooked in the cuff of his sweatpants.
Oh.
He had the big baggy sweatpants, and I could see the heel just get caught because they were too baggy.
Mm-hmm.
And when he went up, he tripped, and he fell down like a big giant skyscraper right on my face.
No.
And I remember going and he was coming like a cartoon. It's no, I feel like Wile E. Coyote. I was holding up a sign going, Anyway, he completely busted my nose open again. My dad hit the ring. I was bleeding all over the place again, pouring out of both nostrils. My dad hit the ring. He was so mad. He was ready to make a comeback on Casabuba, but it felt horrible. I remember he felt just terrible about it. And I was I saw it. I knew it was an accident. I saw his heel actually get caught in the cuff, and I saw him trip, and I knew it. But anyway, that's an aside from the story. But Leo was the things I learned from Leo was that the champion has to be a guy that can work with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always a guy that he taught me the things he told me and the lessons I learned from Leo, which was every day. It was you got to learn how to be able to work with anybody.
Right.
That's an important aspect to your career. You're working for your dad. You want to always be able to, work with anybody under whatever circumstance. And I learned a lot of things from Leo. Even if somebody gets hurt, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
How do you? And then it's Leo would. Even that when I shattered my nose with Leo with the elbow smash, it was he would talk to you in the ring, and you just work through it, and he was really careful and safe, and you learn that he was a guy that protected the guy he worked with, and I came back after I had every time I ever worked with Leo, I had so much respect for him.
Right. Yeah.
And when you watch the Wembley match with the British Bulldog.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That finish is Leo Burke's finish.
How about that?
That's everything. Leo Burke, everything. I remember Leo Burke. I was wrestling in Edmonton.
Mm-hmm.
I think I didn't want to win the belt on TV. Because then it was you had to win in Calgary. It seemed like the belt always changed hands in Calgary.
Yeah.
And I made the suggestion that we do it in Edmonton and then maybe even do it in Regina and some of the other towns so that we can keep them more alive because the title never changes there. We don't say where it changed. We say it changed.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I remember I was winning the title in Edmonton, and Leo was leaving the next day from back home to go back to the Maritimes. And he goes, I think I should just put you over. And he goes, I got to finish. And he goes, you just go for a sunset flip and, I'll hook your legs and fall flat. Like, you just hook my legs and fall flat. I'm like, you really? Like, that it's going to be pretty flat. And he goes, no, trust me. Watch it. And I remember it's like, really? Like, sunset flip? Like, I remember it's like kind of hard to, but I also always knew, like, if Leo said, no, this is really good. It was like, okay, I'm not going to argue with Leo. It was always like, okay. I want to kind of say, like, he kind of explained it to me in the dressing room, and it seemed pretty elementary, really. And, when I did it that night in Edmonton, they kind of completely blew the roof off the building. And I remember it was like, holy shit, what a pop.
Man.
Like, what a pop. I remember it was like, the place exploded, and then it was like, and then he left. I never saw him again for a long time. And when he came back, I got bigger, and I got a lot better. I'd been to Atlanta wrestling and came back. And I got a little more education, and I learned a lot from Dynamite Kid and stuff like that. But Leo was the one that taught me how to use my brain. Like, he was such a thinker, and I incorporated a lot of stuff in my wrestling through my career where it's like, where it's thinking. Yeah. Like, like as an example, like when I wrestled Steve Austin, WrestleMania 13, and I pick up the ring bell and I'm gonna take it over to the apron and take it in the ring, and I'm gonna brain Steve Austin with the bell. Right. And I walk over and I set it on the apron, and then I change my mind, and then I go over and get a chair. And I pick up one chair, and I go, this one's not good enough. It's got padding on it or something. I pick up a metal chair, and I go, this is perfect. And I forget all about the bell, slide under the bottom rope, and I'm going to the ring, and I'm working Steve over with a chair. But I mean, everyone forgets about the bell then, and the bell is the key. Right. Sitting on the apron for the whole match. And that's a Leo Burke type of... and he would tell you, they'll forget all about the bell. They will just forget about it as long as nobody, one of the ring boys or somebody that's in the promotion goes, I'll just move the bell on the way. So we had to make sure everybody knew, don't touch the fucking bell. But,
right, don't touch it.
But those are the kind of things that Leo taught me, like to think ahead and how to think, imagine things, and he was such a masterclass. And I'll be honest, there's a lot of guys I've worked with over the years that I remember like talking to certain guys about Leo Burke. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of guys that never rated him. Really? I remember Ric Flair going, I said, you run me a lot of Leo Burke. I was a big fan of your work, and he kind of looked at me like, Leo Burke, like he's just a fucking job guy or something. Like he really had no idea. He didn't have a deep down respect for Leo. Leo was just like Stephen Barty sitting in the dressing room or something. He didn't really seem to know anything about him or rate him at all. Wow. And I was always surprised by that. It was back in when I first met Ric Flair, probably in 81 or maybe I met him in WWF in probably 88, 89, somewhere in there. Yeah, somewhere. But I was always surprised by that. Like, really, I remember even Pat Patterson was a guy that he asked me one time. He goes, "Who's the best worker that you can? Who do you think was the greatest worker?" Mm-hmm. And I said Leo Burke for sure. And then I remember Pat kind of giving me that, like, Leo was nobody. Leo never did anything. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Wow. You just never really watched him, never really knew him, never met him. Heard stuff about him, but never really had any kind of big, he never had much praise for him anyway. He was always like talking about, Leo Burke was like talking about, like nobody. Man. So, I mean, I was always really surprised by that.
And you'd think Pat, too, like, being, like, Canadian and all that stuff, he would have been, like, well on the radar of him,
Well, he had the exact same thoughts about Archie the Stomper.
Really?
He asked me one time, he goes, who do you think's the total package, if you could build one wrestler, who was like the best one, do you think? Psychology, great look, great talk, great blah, 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 perfect. And I said, Archie the Stomper for sure. Like he could work. He was a really intense worker. He was a great villain, great promo, had a great look, had a great, I heard Pat goes, he never rated him. Like he was like, he always thought he was like a 4 out of 10 or something, and it's like a lot of guys that Patterson
mm-hmm.
didn't rate that I think were as good as or better than Pat.
Mm-hmm.
But they were guys that he never ever watched.
Wow.
He never really watched them. He maybe heard about them, maybe passed through a territory and saw them for 2 seconds or something, but he never had any real, he didn't rate them anyway. And I was always kind of like, I knew Pat Patterson and certain guys were pretty smart about their workers and who they liked and who they didn't. They weren't stupid idiots either.
Yeah.
And the fact that they didn't know how good Leo Burke was their own, that's their own loss. I can tell you, I haven't seen Leo Burke over the years. Judging from my career and the things I learned from him, I would say Leo Burke is one of the greatest of all time. Period. Like, in fact, I can't top of my head right now. If you said name one wrestler that was better than Leo Burke, I would say can't name you one. I can't name you one wrestler that was better than Leo Burke. I really can't, and that's why I find it a little frustrating when some people don't even rate him. Just because somebody is in their early matches doesn't mean he's not a great worker.
Right. Exactly.
And I think someone like Ric Flair was in the main event and was too preoccupied with his own stardom and his own, what he's going to do in his match.
Yeah.
He's not paying attention to anything that anyone else does, and he would dismiss someone like Leo Burke mostly because of his own failing to judge talent.
Mm-hmm.
But me, I think in my circumstance, being the son of Stu Hart and a wrestling promoter, I had to always keep my eyes open for talent and people that might want to pass through Calgary or whatnot. And I was always a good judge of talent because it's like this guy could do good in Calgary, or But for me, Leo Burke was he was the best. I don't know. I learned so much from him, and I learned so much from the Dynamite Kid. The two of them, the two different styles, the two different kind of. Leo was a total worker, whereas Dynamite was a bit of a ruffian and a. Not always on the level with you out there.
Yeah.
But Leo was all about working.
Mm-hmm.
He never hurt you on purpose, or he always did the smart things. I found Leo just a fantastic storyteller. Like when Leo would sit you down and go, "This is what we're gonna do for the finish," and it might be 4 wrestlers sitting in a dressing room kind of looking at each other, and he'd just map out the match.
Mm-hmm.
It was always so black and white and simple and straightforward, and it was like, you go through years of listening to people tell you what to do in wrestling, and you learn that there's some guys actually, when they tell you what to do in wrestling, they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Like Dusty Rhodes, when he told you something to do in a match, he knew what he was talking about. He was good advice, and certain guys had that ability, and Leo Burke was a guy that was a great worker, had great psychology, and simplified wrestling into simple, believable, sort of a believable style. Like you were saying about, no one could milk a headlock better than Leo Burke or an armbar. Jeez, I had so many matches where we would work a hammerlock, and then I would just reverse it and work it for 20 minutes the other way. It was always a pleasure to work with. When you came back, you'd have a good sweat going, and he was one of those kind of guys that would hug you when the match was over, and it was something special always about, especially Leo. I knew when he worked with me for years that he used to tell me, "Guys, I love working with you."
Yeah.
It's like I get excited, knowing that I'm working with you next week and we're going to work a program for 3 weeks as babyface matches or whatever it is. I remember it was always a pleasure, and often we went an hour. And they were, I think there was, in those days, there was wrestling fans that you probably might remember in the Maritimes, how the fans were so believable. Like they believed stuff back then. In Calgary, it was like the matches I had with Leo Burke. I don't know about everybody in the audience, but I know that there was old timers, that, guys in the 70s and 80s that were, in their last days. But they would walk out of the building and swear that match is absolutely totally real, and that Bret Hart lost by a hair. It was always, you could just see that Leo made wrestling real for fans that wanted to pretend that it was really real, and that they knew wrestling like the same way you see coaches at kids' hockey games and stuff. Like they want to pretend that they know all about Leo Burke's sleeper hold and how Bret Hart's going to get out of it, or Leo was a master at making fans understand the logic of what we're trying to pretend is happening. And, like a headlock, making someone really believe, like, holy shit, these are professionals. And that's why that headlock hurts so much and they can't get out of it. It's because these are professional wrestlers and they know more than the average Joe. But, I find a lot of that mentality is just doesn't exist anymore.
I know, it's a shame. I see that so many times where it's just like, and you mentioned it too, like how he simplified everything. And when you think about wrestling, and the simple aspect of it is like good versus evil, just the simple basis of it all. And then you look at telling it in the ring, there's not a whole lot you need to do to really get a crowd invested into stuff where it comes to like, the headlock or anything like that. I was, even before I started this interview with you, I watched a little clip of you and him wrestling, and it was from 1982. And again, telling the story with the headlock and everything like that. But the finish, and you were the champion, the North American champion at the time. And how the finish happened is like all of a sudden he did something a little underhanded where he pulled your hair, and then he got you in a headlock, and then basically like choked you out at the end. And then that was I don't know, the clip cut off at the end, so I don't know what the exact details of the finish were after the fact, but I thought that was such a cool way to kind of end a match almost,
I'm not sure it was a match. I'm thinking, I do remember one time he beat me with the sleeper.
Yes.
Right in the middle of the ring.
Right in the middle of the ring.
It was like, and I really fought to get out of it.
Yes.
And we went through quite and then I just lost, and I thought, I loved the believability of it. It was like, why wouldn't it be like that?
Yeah, right.
Why, how often does that happen? I'm like the third babyface from going up the card count. I don't think I was a top guy yet. And if I was, even back in those days, if I was over, which I was at a certain time, it was because of Leo. Leo got me over, established that he gave me the credibility that my brothers never could get. Like, he actually gave me that credibility that this is one of the Hart boys that he can really wrestle.
Yeah.
Like he's more like his dad than his brothers.
Wow.
And not that that's even true, but it's the presentation. He made me seem like I was the brother to watch. But keep an eye on this one.
Yeah.
This one's, and he helped mold me in a lot of ways. And I think I learned so much from Leo Burke. I learned so much from Dynamite Kid. Mm-hmm. He brought with him a lot of the English, kind of that English, British type theater wrestling. I don't even know how to explain it, but it was when he would talk about something in the van, like an idea that he had, or something they did in England. Mm-hmm. I would sit there and go, why don't we do one of those? Why don't we do a 10-round boxing match? And then I did a match where we did 5 rounds boxing, and then we did 5 rounds wrestling.
Seriously?
And I lost the title. Yeah. That was he had some name for it. It was an English rounds match or something. And I was like, I accept. But it didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But it was different, and I think I learned stuff from Dynamite that was a little bit odd. And where you go, it's not really such a great idea. But Dynamite, once it was his idea, he would want so hard to prove that it would work that if I actually went out there and tried to help him with this idea, and then it worked somewhat, it would work. I don't remember ever having a bad one, like a bad situation.
Right.
But it was those kind of things, like having I wrote about it in my book, but I had a Dynamite Kid in a ladder match in Calgary. Neither one of us had ever had a ladder match before. And I remember I told him it's kind of a gimmick match that you have once. It's kind of like a cage match. You only do it once in a while. You can't do them every week or anything.
Right.
I said, but this was, I told him, I said, it'd be really suspenseful. Because every time you climb up, you almost get the money or whatever it is. And then you keep pulling the belt or the ladder out from underneath.
Yeah.
Until you have to work around the ladder. But I know, it's in my book and all that, and you might have already read it, so I won't go too long rant about it. But it's like we had never had a ladder match. And, when we drove up that day to the building, I don't even know if we knew that we were in a ladder match.
Oh, really?
And at that time, we drove up together, parked in the building, and walked in. I remember we were both kind of surprised. Oh, yeah, like we're in a fucking ladder match. And Dynamite's like, what's the ladder match? And I'm like, it's a man. I tried to explain it to him. I was like, and he's going, okay. Because I had to have told him about it a few weeks before, and he cleared it, but it was like, we got to kind of refresh each other's memories on what we were going to do. And but I know our wives, they weren't really smart. They weren't our wives yet. They were our girlfriends. Our girlfriends or sisters. And I remember we pretended we weren't really good friends all the way up, but we slowly kind of started to have conversation about certain things, that it was like growing up in England. And, I could tell that they were like, oh, it's nice they're talking and they're friends and stuff like that. It was more of a put on, but we were trying to, because we didn't know how long we'd be going out with them. So we were like trying to protect the business as we were back in those days.
Yeah.
But I just remember, they didn't expect anything. And all of a sudden, I remember that night, they both up in the stands watching. And of all the matches I've ever had, I don't think I ever had a match that compared to that one. It was the most gory, bloodthirsty, violent wrestling match I've ever had in my life. And it was so extreme and so real. I'm sure anyone watching it would go, don't tell me that match was not totally, completely real. It was so intense. I remember Dynamite ran me into the wall, and there was blood everywhere. And I running him into a wall, and he was bleeding. And I went to bang his head on a chair. Mm-hmm. And he hit the chair so hard with his hands, with his forehead, like he had his hands up by his forehead. Mm-hmm. But he really hit the chair, and I really slammed his head into the chair, and he bounced back with his hair, snapped his head back, and it completely shattered my nose. He just broke my nose right in half, like just right in the middle of my nose. It was like someone picking up a rock about as big as a medicine ball and just hitting me right in the face.
Oh my God.
And I cut the back of Dynamite's head open with my nose.
Oh man.
And he was bleeding, and my nose, I could stick my baby finger right down the middle of my nostril. When I got to the dressing room, it looked like somebody hit me with a truck. Oh. I mean, I looked down, I said, how bad is it? He goes, Dynamite almost got gagged. He goes, it's fucking bad.
Oh, geez.
And it was like, and I was like, okay, there's nothing I can do about it. My nose is on the left side of my face now. I didn't know. I just never heard. I was pretty numb from it.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, there's the razor cuts and all that you already got from before that happened. And it's like, it's this violent match. I remember when we climbed up the ladder, and he, I remember the finish. We were like, it was like a double knockout. We were both lying there on the mat. And then I start to get up first. And I think the heel manager jumped up on the apron, and John Foley, who was Dynamite's manager in those days, whacked me over the head with the cane. And as soon as the referee turned around, I was down. And he started kind of like a double knockout. And I'm trying to remember now. I know that me and Dynamite were down. And Dynamite started to climb up now, and I'm like out cold from what John Foley did to me. Like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
collapsed and down. I'm not moving. And Dynamite starts to pull himself together. He starts to climb up. And he started climbing up the ladder. And he told me, like, he explained that. I wrote all this in my book. It's like, he was like, when I start to shake the ladder, that means like it'll wobble a little bit. Like he was all trying to make it wiggle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he goes, just jump up and drop kick, but don't touch the ladder. Let me tip it over myself. Because if you drop kick it, it'll be too strong.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll flip over and it won't look as good. Let me tip it gently myself. And he leaned into the ladder, and I barely jumped up, and I barely touched the ladder with the toe of my boot.
Mm-hmm.
And then he tipped that whole ladder from one side of the ring all the way to the other. And then he crotched himself on the top rope and bounced out and landed right on top of John Foley. And I remember the place went absolutely crazy. And I remember climbing up the ladder and pulling the money down. And I got a picture of it in my book.
Oh, man.
But it was like, I remember looking around at the building, and it's like there was people with their squinched, and they were like frothing at the mouth. It was like such a real fight.
Yeah.
And I remember Adrian Street was a British wrestler that was here at the time that saw that match. He came up to me after, he goes, "That's the greatest match I've ever seen in my life."
No shit. Adrian Street said that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And he said it to me years later. He goes, "That match is still the best match I ever watched."
Wow.
That was way into my career. And I would say, like, if I had a video of that match, honestly, I could put that match up against anything. The Stone Cold match at WrestleMania 13, the Iron Man match, any match I ever had. And I would say it'd be a hard time saying that wasn't the greatest match I ever had.
Oh, my
But in
God.
saying all that, it's like I learned so much from both Dynamite and Leo that when I think of like my style and my career and how I maybe blossomed as a wrestler in WWF,
Right.
that it was all because of both those guys. I learned so much working against Dynamite and taking some of his better ideas and making them work and sort of psychology that he had. English wrestlers have a lot of theatrical sort of thinking in their matches,
Yeah.
which was always really different for me. Like they always had a lot of routines, and like where you flip and do this roll, and then you roll into this, and then that happens, and it's all here, and then it looks so choreographed sometimes. But sometimes it was always like, wow, if you just did that move out of the blue in a match, you would get a good. It's the time then you would learn when to do a move like that. You can't do a whole match like you just turn it to Dean Malenko.
Right, yeah.
So you want to do one of those kind of moves once in a while, and then you learn to measure what's a good idea and what's. And I learned so much from the Leo and Dynamite, and like all my years in my career, there's other guys that I worked with like Ric Flair. I wouldn't put Ric Flair. I love Ric Flair, but I wouldn't put him in Leo Burke's class.
Man, yeah.
I put Ric Flair in a great worker class. He was a great worker of his generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you classify Leo as the generation before Rick, but he was. Let me put it this way: someone like Harley Race. I remember talking to Harley Race or Dory Funk or Terry Funk talking about Leo Burke, and they were talking about him like he was a god.
Wow.
That he was one of the greatest. What a worker. And they were always sold on. The only guy I ever heard put him down and really kind of didn't rate him was Rick.
Wow.
And I think that was just probably because of the way he was being used.
Mm-hmm.
He was probably just a guy getting a check, and he didn't really care. Leo was never the kind of guy to cry about how he was being used. He was just probably down the Carolinas, getting a break from the Maritimes and hoping to make as much money as he could.
Right.
Send it home kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I always think someone like Ric Flair missed how great Leo Burke was. I never understood how great he was. Maybe ever worked with him.
Right.
And if he did work with him, maybe it was a TV match or something where he didn't get to see the real Leo Burke. But, I don't know. I'm glad you mentioned Rick Martel, because you could see so many wrestlers through my career.
Mm-hmm.
They were, as soon as you said, I'm a big fan of Leo Burke, so I wrestle like, just call a match like Leo.
Yeah.
Or let's work like Leo. Rick Martel he loved to work, and he loved to work like Leo.
Yeah.
Swap holds and tell you, Rick Martel could do that kind of wrestling, and he learned it all from Leo, and he could do that in a heartbeat, as I could. And I don't know if you remember Alex Smirnoff.
No, I don't remember him. No. Mm-mm.
Well, he was from the Maritimes.
Okay.
He broke into business. He wrestled in WWF. He eventually moved to California. And when I first started in WWF in 1984, nobody would give me a good match. Nobody. Like, I'd go out there, and I was usually first match, and I was usually losing. But I would work with one wrestler after another that just didn't give a shit.
Right, yeah.
One of them call it sunset flip, and the only thing they call in the match before they pin you and stuff like that. It was like, I'm better than that. I can do more than a sunset flip. But
yeah.
It's like, no, that's all they want. Yeah. And it was kind of like that. And then I worked with Alex Smirnoff. And he was just a guy, he was like a local guy that was there for just having to have his gear with him, and they put him in a match with me. It was like the beginning of WWF was just beginning running in California in those days. Beginning in '84, it was all just starting. And so I worked with Alex Smirnoff, and literally as soon as we tied up, he goes, "You worked with Leo Burke a lot. I can tell the way you work."
Yeah, but
he would take me over, and then we would just wrestle. We had such good matches. We had better matches than anybody could believe. Or like Chief Jay Strongbow was coming back and going, "I can't believe what a match you guys had." And it's like, he's like Leo Burke. He's a maritime guy. He can do all that stuff. Like, and Hubert Glenn was another guy. He was like a carbon copy of Leo. He had all the mannerisms of Leo and the way Leo walked.
Wait, who was that, Brett? Who was that?
Hubert Glenn.
Oh, okay.
Hubert Glenn.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And he was a great wrestler too. Like, he was a carbon copy, spitting image. Everything Leo did, Hubert Glenn copied it and tried to be the same.
Yeah.
And that was a good guy to copy. Like, Hubert Glenn was a great worker.
Yeah. Man.
And so many guys. I think even the Rouger brothers always had a deep respect for Leo Burke and his work, and how good he was, and how technical he was. Like, he could drop a knee drop on your face and look like he knocked all your teeth in, and it was always perfect. Like, it never touched you, never feel anything. He made everything in wrestling was pretend.
Right.
And he was just a masterclass teacher in wrestling. I can't think of anyone on the same level. And when people tell me, I never watched him, or I never knew that about him, it's like, you don't know anything. Like, you missed out on not just one guy in wrestling, but you missed out on maybe, like, I would say for sure, I was, if I was a great wrestler, you could look at how much did I get that from Leo Burke. Yeah, it's like, I got a lot from Leo Burke. Like, I'm a student of Leo Burke's, and I'm proud to say that he taught me a lot. And a lot of the ideas that I had, my great moments, were things that I were developed or done with him in the first place.
Yeah, I believe, it's crazy too. You mentioned, like, you being a student of his, and I told you before we started that, like, wow, I like seeing the names that he helped out too, and maybe you can help confirm these for me too. But I just saw online, like, Ken Shamrock, Edge Christian. Those are several of the names that he helped, and Mark Henry, I know, talked highly about him, and when he got sent up there to work with him, so it's like his legacy is through some really, really good names and memorable names too. So it's pretty.
Yeah, I had a wrestling camp in my house in those days that Leo was in charge of. And he would come to my house, and I had such a big pool area, like indoor pool, that you could set up the ring right next to the pool, and you could train guys all day. I had a high ceiling, and it was like, the only thing was, if you missed the rope for any reason, you could fall right in the pool.
It's not too bad.
Which isn't so bad. But on the other side, it was just a window. I had windows covered up with cardboard. It was like better to fall in the pool than the window.
Right.
But anyway, Leo started training. There was a bunch of guys. Shamrock was one. Glenn Kalka of the Saskatchewan Rough Riders was another one at the same time. He never really made it, I think, because of his football injuries, but he had a lot of heart, and he just kept getting hurt, unfortunately. But he learned. He would have been a great wrestler. I think if he'd come to wrestling 10 years earlier, he would have had a career as a wrestler like Steve Austin or something. He would have had a great career.
Wow.
But unfortunately, he got beat up in football so bad that when it came time to do all the sort of simple things in wrestling, like just drop an elbow on somebody, he'd blow his arm out, like tear a bicep or Tyson. He just kept getting hurt. Old football injuries kept, and that was kind of his downfall. But Leo taught, remember Big Gurkha or something? I can't remember his name. They had a big giant. He's a big.
Was that?
giant.
Oh my gosh, there was two of them. There was the one. Well, I'm trying to think of the
Truth Commission.
Yes, the Truth Commission, exactly. Kurgan, and then there was There was the other guy
yeah,
too.
Kurgan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Kurgan. The other guy was a good worker, but he didn't have much character. Like he was just like a big gunner, heel, and same with Kurgan.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the one that suggested they had a guy from South Africa that was good on the mic, and I was the one that suggested call him the Truth Commission.
Oh, really?
And they said, okay, well, we'll do it. So then I had to train everyone at my house. And so they all flew these guys up to Calgary, and Leo was teaching Edge and Christian both in my house.
Wow.
Teddy Hart, I don't know if you ever know Teddy Hart.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Even before he became an idiot, he was training there and learned it. And, it was just kind of whoever showed up, Leo would train him. And Leo got paid the same every. He got a certain check every week. And he would just have classes. He would he'd tell everyone what time to come. And Test was another one that was there. I remember Big Test. He died of a drug overdose a few years later. But he was one of those guys. I met him in Toronto. He was a bouncer at a club. And I remember next day he was sitting in my living room. And Leo was training all these guys. And I remember I would come home from being on the road. And then Leo would say, could you just work with one guy? I've been telling him all week that we'll let one guy work one match with you. Like if whoever works the hardest gets to work with you in a single match.
How about that?
Which is a pretty big thing to be like a guy learning the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you get to work with the world champion. You get to work with the world champion in a single match with no audience there, but you're going to have a whole match, and it's a real match. Right? They're going to ring the bell, and they'll correct you on little things all the way through the match. And then I would do it. I did it with Edge. I remember wrestling Edge up there. I had a whole match with him. I did it with a couple of guys. I remember might have been Mark Henry.
Yeah.
And I remember going, like, I am so beat up. I feel like I'm home like a basketball. Like I'm just like, I need a vacation for real. Because I've been on the road for 6 weeks or something. And I come home and Leo's like, can you just come in for a couple of minutes?
Just a couple.
Like, are you kidding me? Like, I would go in and I would do it. I would, I'd be so sore. And I'd be like, spend the afternoon and then taking arm drags and stuff like that. Working stuff with. But, Shamrock and Vader was another guy that was there.
Oh.
I remember put Vader and Shamrock. I put their whole match together.
Man.
Because Shamrock was a professional wrestler that became a UFC wrestler.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, well, I know how to work. I was like a TV job guy like 10 years ago. He actually wrestle, take arm drags and all. He learned how to work as a wrestler.
Wow.
And then now he was a retired world champion. Like he's world champion. And when I met him, he said, I broke my wrist and I got to let my wrist heal so I can go back.
Yeah.
And he goes, I can't go back until my wrist heals. And I said, well, why don't you do pro wrestling for like a year? Right. Your wrist heals. You still make some money.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked, the next day he said, all right, I'm in. And then I talked Vince into it. And Vince signed him. And it's funny that when they signed him, Triple H and Shawn tried to get him fired.
Oh.
For no reason other than he was just, they didn't like him.
Wow.
And I just remember Vince called me in his office and he goes, I'm thinking about letting Shamrock go.
Whoa.
And I'm like, why? He goes, some of the guys think he's a little stiff and then, and this and that. And he didn't even have any reason.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, what do you think? What's your honest opinion? I said, I would keep him.
Yeah.
He's doing all right. He's doing great. And then like a couple of weeks later, he's refereeing my match with Steve Austin and they kept him on and then he had his whole career there.
Right.
But it was just one of those things. But he learned up in Calgary with me, Leo Burke. And a lot of those guys learned from Leo, not me. But I did wrestle select guys for one match every couple of weeks when I came home. And I don't remember which ones they were. But I kind of worked a little bit with everybody. And like I know Ed, I had like a whole match with him back when he was just a kid kind of thing. And he was so pumped.
I bet.
And excited. And then it's like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to shower. I'm going to get out of the ring.
I'm going to jump in the pool.
But yeah, it was like, that was all Leo that really took the time to teach everybody. And like you talk about Leo to Mark Henry or Edge, and they get tears in their eyes. They learn so much from him, and it's he was a special guy, and I know he's in a better place now. And I know the last couple of years he had really bad, I don't know if you call it dementia, but he couldn't remember. I remember calling him up on the phone. He was in tears. He told me, he goes, I can't remember what I did yesterday.
Oh.
I have no idea what I did the whole day. I'm just a blank. And he goes, and he started getting emotional.
Yeah.
Like I'm losing my mind. I don't know what I did. And I think I talked to him one more time after that, and he wasn't even sure who I was anymore. And it was like, just kind of like, it was so heartbreaking to talk to Leo that I said, I'll come visit you.
Yeah, yeah.
Where are you? He goes, I'm in Martyr Loop somewhere, which is like 15, 20 minutes from my house. I'm like, okay, well, where are you? Tell me your address. He couldn't tell me that. Couldn't find anything
really?
that had no idea where he lived. Had no idea where the phone number was. He couldn't. He was like, and it was really sad for me because he was trying really hard. And he's like, I can't. I don't know where I am. I don't know what I'm doing. And he was, and it was like, that's a living hell. And I hope I never go through it. And I'm glad he's at peace now.
Yeah.
And, he didn't get a very good ending. He deserved more than that. He was a way better guy than that.
Oh man, that's sad to hear, and it's like it's good you got to talk to him, but yeah, I mean, oh my gosh, like not having somebody to be there, but and just the way to go out like that is very, very tough, and that's a difficult thing to go through too. Just as somebody that cares about somebody, but to be the person to actually have that happen is very tough too. It's I
had some very funny memories with Leo too.
Yeah, I bet.
Oh my God, those are some of the funniest, the hardest laughs I've had in wrestling. A lot of them have to do with Leo.
Yeah.
There was. I'll tell you one story before I go.
Okay.
But it's just a classic Leo. I don't know where it came from. I kind of get the impression it happened once before, a couple of times. There got to be like a rib once in a while. Whenever you want to rib somebody, there's this St. John's ambulance medic at the building all the time in Saskatoon. And there was only about 200 people that showed up every week anyway. Like a very empty, sort of empty arena most of the time. Kind of anyway. So but he was always there. And if somebody got hurt, carried back in the stretcher, he was always there and acting like a doctor.
Yeah.
And I think he might have been a little bit mentally challenged. I'm not sure. He's like borderline, like whether he was. Maybe he was a real medic. I don't know. Like he had the uniform, the black and white uniform. Now.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he was there every week, all the time. And he looked more like a scarecrow. He looked like kind of like a vulture, like an ostrich. Like he had a big, tall, skinny neck and glasses. And anyway, we were wrestling, and it was Leo came up and he goes, "First match is Ben Bassrab and so in a match. I can't remember who was in the match." And he goes, "Why don't we do that finish where the babyface? It's a babyface match."
Yeah.
That's what it was, 2 baby faces. And one baby face goes for a leapfrog, and the one that's coming underneath sort of ends up colliding with him and accidentally giving him a nut shot. And then, after 30 seconds, and he can't continue, and the referee's like, he's down selling it, and the referee's checking, and finally the referee stops the match and says it's no contest.
Yeah.
And, it was a way to keep both baby faces over. If you can call it that. It was just a way to give a different finish than the same thing every night. It was like, so Leo suggested that finish to me, and I'm like, what do we think? And he started laughing. He goes, watch this match. And I didn't know what he was talking about. But as soon as it happened, the rest of it, I remember I think it was my brother-in-law, Ben Dashrap.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Leo told me, he goes, you got to sell it all the way because they're kayfabe, he's going to come back, the medic and the dog, they're going to bring you back to the dressing room. You got to keep selling it because they're not smart to the business. And you got to wait till they leave the dressing room. So they do the match, and they got Ben Dashrap on the stretcher, and it's a babyface match. You got the golf clap leaving. They're helping him back to the dressing room. They actually brought the stretcher back, and he's on the stretcher, and they set it on the floor in the dressing room. And Leo Burke's got that look on his face, and he give me the eyebrows and watch this. And anyway, Ben Dashrap is like lying on the stretcher, and he's just selling like, oh, he really got me, Doc, and all that. The Doc gets down. And I remember it was the funniest thing because Leo's like, you better check him out, Doc. You better check him out. I remember, it's kind of like the doctor's kind of like, you're right, I better check him out.
Oh, boy.
And of course, Ben Dashrap's got no idea what's happening. And all of a sudden, this doctor, this medic looked like a stork. I remember he had his false teeth in his mouth. And I remember they actually started to kind of popping them in and out of his mouth.
Oh, my God.
And I remember he took both hands. He would kind of roll up his sleeves.
Uh-huh.
And he took both hands and just shoved him right down Ben Dashrap's trunks. So just grabbed him by the nuts and started massaging his nuts. He was, take it easy, son. Easy, boy. And he's just playing with, he's squeezing his nuts and trying to get everything. Leo Burke's right behind me. He's laughing so hard. And I'm like, I can't believe this guy. And Ben Dashrap is looking at me like, what the fuck? This guy got me by the balls and all that. Anyway, it was so funny. I laughed so hard. And Leo told me he did the same thing about 5 years earlier or something. It was he's such a mark. The medic was, he's not even a real medic.
He's probably not. Yeah.
But anyway, it was such a funny, hysterical, I laughed so hard. That was Leo Burke's sense of humor in the dressing room. You never forgot it. It was one of those hilarious moments, But,
man.
Anyway, I have nothing but respect and a deep love and affection for Leo. He was always in a good mood, always an easy guy to deal with, and honest and straightforward and direct. And one of the most lovable guys I ever knew in the wrestling business.
Oh, man, it sounds like it, too. And it's and it sounds like so many people learned from him and everything like that. And it's I'm so happy that his legacy kind of gets to carry on. And it's if you had to tell one talent, a modern talent, what's one thing that they should study about Leo Burke, what would it be, would you think? If there's a big aspect you want them to take away from him?
I would say Leo was most famous for psychology.
Yeah.
So, if you want to work a hold, you want to learn how to work a hold, which should be unique and actually make you stand out in today's wrestling if you actually knew what a hammerlock was. I would say that's what I would try to learn from Leo, is that just the psychology and the smoothness and simplicity of one of those kind of guys that's always in the right place. And how did he know to be in that corner and climbing up? He knows. He's just he's always right. Leo Burke is a guy I would say that never made mistakes in the ring. I can't think of ever working with him where he made where he forgot something or he screwed up at the ending, or he's this absolute highest quality professional. And when he learned from guys like Harley, and I know the Funks, both Terry and Dory and the Briscoes had a lot of respect for Leo Burke.
Yeah.
Just because he was such a great worker. And I think through Leo's promotion, and I'm not sure because I don't know much about what it was going on in the Maritimes, but I do know that he was a promoter there near him and his brothers. And later on, he mailed it pretty, but he brought in the world champion to Maritimes and worked with Harley, he worked with Dory Funk, he worked with the Stomper, and he worked with Sweet Daddy Seeky.
Yeah.
He I could talk with Leo all day and learn so much from him. Because he worked with all the guys that, like, I remember him telling me that Archie the Stomper was a phenomenal wrestler. What a great wrestler. And I heard him tell me, he said, you're going to have such good matches with him and you're going to love working with him.
Yeah.
And he was right. It was like first match. I heard Leo was there. Like when I worked with Archie the Stomper, we had such a good match and we came back and he goes, I love working with you. And he was so, like, I was just the kind of guy that he wanted to work with. And he was, to me, like, this is the kind of guy I need.
Heck yeah.
And Leo was the guy that marry you off with somebody before you ever see him.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, oh, when you work with him someday, you're going to have great matches. And like Rick Martel would be another one. Later on, when I worked with Rick, it was like he was always so smooth, and Rick was a top pro wrestler, like one of my favorite guys to work with. Also, and just a total pro on every level, and safe, and had that same theatrical flair that Leo and some of those guys had. But Rick Martel was another guy that learned so much from Leo. He learned, and not just Rick, but Michel Martel, his brother.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Michel Martel was, they were all disciples of Leo.
Wow.
Frenchie Martin, Don Gagne, Frenchie Martin, Rick Martel, that guy named him Inigo, California.
Mm-hmm.
When you met them, they would talk about Leo with stars in their eyes. Like, they would just go on talking about him, like, oh, how good Leo Burke was, and one of the best. Like, they would lose themselves talking and praise of what a great wrestler Leo was. And, that's what I remember about so many wrestlers going back to, say, the mid-'80s and early '90s. When we talk about Leo to someone like Don Gagne,
mm-hmm.
they get tears in their eyes and get emotional and talk about how they learned so much from him, and that he's the one that made them what they are today. And again, Hubert Gallant or Rick Martel. I mean, there's just so many. Anyway, so I don't know if there's anything else you want to cover.
No, I think, I guess, let me see here if there was anything else I wanted to ask when it came to him. No, just, I guess I was going to ask about, like, if you see him in any current talent or anything like that, any aspects of him, but when we mention Edge and guys like that, I'm sure they're kind of progressing that and kind of instilling that in some of the younger talent. Hopefully they listen, though. That's the aspect of it all. You hope, that
I don't see anybody wrestling like Leo Burke did.
Yeah.
There's no Leo Burks left in the wrestling business. Nobody knows what a headlock's for anymore.
No, right?
And nobody knows psychology. Everything is. But back in the day of Leo Burke, they were guys that used psychology to draw money, and they were the guys that passed the art form on.
Yeah.
To guys like me, and I think the greatest generation of wrestlers came in the '90s. I don't think after the '90s. I think it's gone downhill quite a bit. The quality is not the same anymore, and it's like, you don't even have to punch anyone anymore. You can just pretend to punch them.
Right. That's such a
and
frustrating.
You slap your leg. Everyone just slaps your leg and they chop you with powder puff chops on the chest and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like nobody knows what a headlock's for, or how to build psychology, or how to make a wrestling hold meaningful. I find it really hard to watch today, and I hate to be negative about it, but Leo, I would watch. To me, Leo was he was such a valuable guy to learn from. You could just learn all day with him, especially if you rode with him in a car.
Yeah, I bet that. No doubt about that. Well, hey,
he was always quite a ribber, Leo, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he loved to rib his brothers the most. I think the Beast and Rudy Burke.
he give them a hard time.
Them all day, drive them crazy all day long with ideas. Like, he'd get me to present the dumbest ideas to them about matches that we could do. I had one match. I wish I could send it to you, and if I can get it, I'll try to send it to you.
Okay, yeah.
Leo Burke against, I'm sorry, not Leo Burke. It was Rudy Kay against Charlie Buffon.
Mm-hmm.
A black wrestler. I was working for my dad. And I remember watching it with Leo Burke. I can remember it to this day. It was one of those matches where they screwed up the finish 2 or 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
And it was just so funny because Rudy was an old veteran, and he kept getting madder. And anyway, it was just the ending of the match was just classic fake. Like, it was just so terrible. And it was all on live TV kind of thing. But I watched it at my house with Leo Burke, probably back when he had the wrestling, when he was training at my house. But I remember he came over to my house and we put it on the screen and we watched it. And it was it was just a big debacle for Rudy. But we laughed until we cried laughing. It was so funny. He howled, laughed so hard that it puts a smile on my face just thinking about how hard he laughed at that match. If I was to send it to you, I could find it.
Yeah.
Well, I guarantee you will laugh.
Oh, I can't. Yeah, I hope you do.
Funniest stuff. It's like only a 30 seconds of a match, and Ed Whalen's doing the commentary, and it was just early in the show, but once it was on film, it was forever. And I often, I know, like the time I'm talking about, he came over to my house. He might have been training wrestlers all day, and I said, "Come on up here, I'm just going to put this one match on." I put it on, and he laughed till he cried. He cried. He laughed so hard. It was such a beautiful thing to make him that happy.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think the same day, I put the Wembley match on, which he never watched.
Oh, didn't he?
I put it on for him. And he sat like he hadn't seen it. It was a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
He wasn't going to watch a pay-per-view, but he came over to my house, and I put the match on for him without telling him to finish.
Yeah.
And he got tears in his eyes, all the way through the whole match. He was like, "This is the greatest tribute. I can't believe this match is so good." And when we did the finish, he was like, a big smile on his face. I said, "That finish, you remember that finish?" He goes, "I remember that finish."
I remember that.
It was, and I was like, I took your finish, and I always have a funny story about that match, or that finish. Mm-hmm. I remember when the Hart Foundation had a match with the Killer Bees, probably 1987. Mm-hmm. It was on Saturday Night Main Event, when they first had those Saturday Night Main Events.
Yeah.
Which at that time was more people are going to watch you tonight on Saturday Night's Main Event than WrestleMania and you're getting millions and millions and millions of Americans are going to watch you tonight on TV.
Wow.
It was a huge platform so we're working with the Killer Bees. First time we ever wore pink outfits, Jim Neidhart and myself. To give you an idea of the time frame. But it was
wow, yeah.
And they were trying to come up with an ending for the Bees to win the match. Mm-hmm. And I said, I just kind of spit it out. I said, how about if I did this one with Leo Burke with a sunset flip? And it's an unbelievable finish. Trust me. It's so good. I remember Brian Blair shot it down. And he was like, and I think Brian Blair's a good buddy of mine. It just, I didn't think it was a great move when Leo explained it to me the first time. So I remember Brian Blair goes, it's kind of flat. I'm like, it's not flat. It's actually it'll get a huge pop. Anyway, they passed on it.
Oh, man.
And so I remember going, don't ever give your finishes away. That finish, giving it to them and having them go in there and do it wrong. Yeah. Or do it without enthusiasm. And maybe it just doesn't come off very good, which I don't know how that could happen, but it's that's too good a finish to give to somebody and have them ruin it or waste it.
Right, exactly.
Put that finish in your back pocket and don't ever tell anybody that finish ever again unless you need it, maybe for yourself.
Right,
so
exactly.
I never brought it up ever again. Put it in my pocket and said never again do I ever volunteer a really good finish that I can keep for myself. Mm-hmm. And throughout most of my career, most of my finishes, be it the Iron Man match, or even with Steve Austin and stuff like that, it was always, I had ideas in my head that I would write down and just put them away until I needed them.
Man.
So I need a heel finish tonight. And I'd look in my little book and find heel finishes that I thought of that could work for me if I was a heel. It could work for me. And I would implement it into my match. And I always had at least 2 or 3 good ideas floating around for every match I ever had.
Wow, yeah, that's the thing to do too. And like the neat thing too, and I remember you mentioned this in your book, is like is it true you would always record yourself, right? Like almost like keep a journal basically every night about all the stuff that happened and everything, like throughout it, so you could kind
Yeah, like my book is actually, like when you read in my book that all it's me, Bruce Beefcake, and Kurt Hennig in a room, and we're all drinking beer, and whatever's happening. It's like that's because it really happened.
yeah.
And like literally, I would go to my room after drinking beer or whatever I did with those guys, and then I would make my tape of like whatever I did for the last couple of weeks.
Right.
I didn't talk into it every day, but I would talk into it every few days. If something happened, or I was in a different city, I'd explain what I was doing. I'm in Anchorage, Alaska, of all places. You know, there's always, you know, I did it for I ended up with like 120 tapes.
Wow.
And like if I listen to them, they're all an hour each.
Yeah. Wow.
And they're so insightful, and they're really timeless. Like you can hear what is on in the TV in the background. You know, it's like they got the war in the Gulf happening, and Saddam Hussein was saying something on TV, and I'm talking about Sergeant Slaughter. And
holy shit!
You know, it was just really. I always made sure like you got to have all like whatever's on the news, CNN in the background, so that it captures what's going on this exact day that I'm talking to this thing. So there's a lot of really interesting things that come out of that. I've been reading my transcripts back, and it's a lot of work reading them back.
I bet.
But it is very, it's really special to go back into that time warp and really feel how it felt for me back then, and the happy career that I had, and you know, I'm so glad I did that. I know that, you know, when I first went to WWF in 1984, I had just come back from Japan, and I remember going, you should write all this stuff down. Like, Japan was so different and such a different world, and, you know, and so I remember going, I should get a diary.
Right.
Started making notes in it. And then I remember thinking, shit, I'll write a diary. As soon as I finish my match every night, I'll go back to my room, and I'll just write a quick sort of, you know, what's been going on.
Right.
And I remember in those days I was rooming with SD Jones.
Oh, SD Jones.
And
nice.
I just remember, I just remember thinking, if SD Jones came back to my room, opened up the door, and I was sitting in a bed writing in a diary, it wouldn't take long before everybody in the dressing room knew I was writing a diary, and nobody would talk to me if I was writing a diary. And I realized I was like, oh my God, don't ever fucking buy a diary. Like, don't ever. That would just kill me off, especially at that time, because I just got there. Nobody gave a shit about me. And I was on really thin ice, and I was like, and I remember thinking about it, I said, you know what? Dictaphone.
There you go.
I'll buy a dictaphone, and I'll just make little put little cassettes in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I remember I started making tapes when I first joined WWF in 1984. Before WrestleMania 1, I started making tapes. But every time I made a tape, I'd erase it. I'd make an entry, and I'd erase it. I'd listen back later the next day or a couple of days later, and I don't know how many times I erased it because I hated the way I talk.
Yeah, it's hard to listen to yourself.
Which a lot of people do. Like when they make recordings, they hate how their voices, and I started to really hate mine. But I keep erasing it. And they were waking up and I go, you've been erasing everything for the last 3 months. Like, you can't keep erasing everything. You're never going to get anything done if you keep erasing. So I made a promise to myself that starting today, I'll make entries, but I never listen to them back.
Mm-hmm.
And I just say whatever the hell I say. I'm not going to restrict myself. You know, if I was with a girl or I did this or I had a great match, I got into an argument with someone in the dressing room or whatever happened that day, I'm going to talk about it.
Right.
And so it's really quite telling. It's really accurate and really tells of what I was going through. You know, when I read back to my transcripts of my tapes, I can just feel the ache of loneliness. Like you're so alone all the time as a wrestler. You know?
I believe it, yeah.
Your friends are the wrestlers, but everyone's out for themselves. Like every wrestler wants their spot, especially to hire your client. like once me and Jim were tag belts, like every wrestler that's a tag team wants to get the belts from us. It's like it was always a competition, and working away from home and having to leave Christmas morning.
Yeah.
Missing your kids' birthdays all the time, right? I saw some TV show with some football players missing their kids' birthdays and stuff, and I'm like, they got no idea.
No, right? They don't. In comparison?
If they had my life, they would go. I think if you look up I have more matches in my career than any other wrestler in history. It's like I got the most. And no one will ever catch me because no one is that stupid to wrestle 330 times a year. Well, I ain't not kidding. I think my first year in WWF, I wrestled 320 days.
Oh my gosh.
And then I think that's not including double shots.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And travel days home. And that was my first year in WWF. And that's like, I think the next year was probably like 310 or then 305 or 308. I mean, when I think about my life back then and how I even mentally survived is, kudos to me because it's like, I can't believe I did it.
No,
and anything that I did that I've questioned about myself, it's like, the fact that I could do all that and still keep my sanity and stay focused and still, not lose my house and not let my career tip over and cocaine and the girls and the life. And it's like, I stand today as a testimony of that it survived all that stuff. And I live my life every day for all those people that didn't make it, like Kurt Hennig and Rick Rude and Jim Neidhart and Davey Boy and Dynamite and Owen. It's like I understand everybody I know. I don't even have any friends left anymore because they're all gone. Like everybody's dead.
Yeah.
I'm not friends with Beefcake and Hogan. There's only a handful of guys left. Like Valentine, like maybe come up with 25 names of wrestlers that are left.
Right, yeah.
And it's not that important anymore to get back to any of the ones that are left. It's like, but it's like I really do feel like a guy that went to war and came back and there's nobody left.
Yeah.
Nobody made it. And it might sound like a little over dramatic, but it's true. It's like everyone's gone.
It is. It wears on the business, and you think about it too. It's just like it's good that you are somebody that's kind of keeping their memory alive too. Obviously, like people were fans of them and everything like that, but it's like knowing who they are and going through that with all of them. It's like you're carrying on their legacy, and everybody. I know the fans appreciate it for sure. I certainly do. And somebody like Leo Burke, it's just like to learn more about him and what he contributed to the business, and to give him a platform to kind of to get that moment. It's nice to have too. So, oh my gosh, it's definitely tough. I could only imagine being on the road. And I was talking. I do the show with RVD, and I was talking to him about like how I travel once a month for wrestling stuff, maybe if I'm that busy, but like for what you guys put yourselves through, the travel is such a killer aspect of it all.
Well, I think that my book that I wrote is like it's the only book. I think Dave Meltzer told me that I use your book to fact check stuff.
Yeah, how about that?
And it's like, I can say with almost pretty clear certainty that there's no lies in my book. Like everything's true, or at least that's what I believed at the time.
Right.
Like if I express my thoughts about this guy or that guy, or this guy did that, or this is what happened last night, it's because that's what happened last night. Mm-hmm. And I was there in the bar when this happened to the Rockers, or it's like when you read my book, it's like. When I had someone that said to me, your book is about everything that ever happened in your whole life all in one book. And I'm like, well, not quite.
Not quite.
But it's all true. Like, when I read my book, that's why I at least admire about it. I go, it's all true. I really believed that at the time, that this and I'm right, my instincts are pretty good all the way through.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think it's. I think my book is the only one. But Mick Foley's is a great book.
Yeah, his is good too. Yeah.
But it's a different kind of book than mine. My book is really chops up, gives you the whole. I think it gives you a history of wrestling.
Yes.
Really, and it puts you right in the front seat, and you get to drive the car all the way through the whole. I don't know. I don't know of anybody that ever wrote a book. I know I read Lou Fez's book, and I liked it for its honesty, but it wasn't as fun as my book. My book was more like a big adventure.
It was. It is.
But I really considered like my book a testimony of the wrestling life that has changed already. You can see it's not the same anymore. It's not the same business.
Yeah.
And not the same passions. And guys like Leo Burke and myself will fade from memory soon enough. And, people will be talking about, Seth Rollins or, this guy or that guy. And I have a lot of respect for today's wrestlers, but they are not like what I did.
It's a difference. It's just so different in a lot of ways. It's like that from.
And I wish they would take a few more pages of my life, my wrestling life, and put that in their matches because it's missing. I'm deep down inside, I'm a wrestling fan.
Yeah.
And, what I learned to do as a wrestler is what I loved to do as a kid. Like when I was a kid, I remember thinking, what would I do if I was a kid? Like I always had, teddy bears or Barbie dolls or something I was wrestling with her. Wrestling was everything,
Yeah, right.
In my family.
Yeah.
I'd wrestle with spoons. I'd wrestle with pencils on my desk. I'd wrestle with, things like, I started to understand psychology and what would be good. It would be really cool if you did this right there.
Yeah.
How about if they did this? I'd just be a little kid thinking of stuff. I'd be watching my dad's wrestling and I'd see somebody jump up for a drop kick and miss him by about a foot. And then the guy would take a big bump.
Yeah.
And I would go, that guy's a shit. I would watch, and it was a critic, and I liked my wrestling to be real.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I liked somebody to jump up with both feet and touch the guy on the chin with a drop kick. Yeah. Then I'll believe it. If you miss him by a foot, don't expect me to be impressed. Because I was a critical fan.
That's the way. That's the way to be.
That's why I was as good as I was. I watched things in wrestling matches with. We have so many guys from Leo Burke to Sweet Daddy Suki to Archie the Stomper and Abdullah Butcher. They all taught me so much about different styles of wrestling.
Yeah.
You could say it's the one, but Abdullah Butcher is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time.
Oh, man. And
he didn't get any credit for it at all. Everyone just thinks of him as this big fat guy that all he did was get blood everywhere. Maybe he turned into that a little bit. He became that.
Right.
But I remember Abdullah Butcher in the 70s, and I can show you the programs from those days. There's a lot of action shots. But Abdullah the Butcher is doing an elbow drop. He's not off a turnbuckle or anything. He's just jumping in the middle of the ring. He's like 8 feet off the ground.
Right.
And he's coming down with an elbow. You can see it. It looks like it's going to kill somebody. And, I watched him for years, and he was always believable.
Oh, he was. Absolutely.
And he was scared. He's the only wrestler that scared the living shit out of me every time he looked at me. And I don't think he gets any credit for what he deserved. He was the greatest monster heel in wrestling ever. And, anyway, I can talk about all kinds of Canadian wrestlers that don't get their due.
That's it. It's so much. I'm more than happy to talk to you about any of these guys because I read your book. I read the one about Heath McCoy's, is the one about Stampede overall. And it's such a fascinating world up there, and so many great characters and people.
I really liked Heath's book; it was really good.
Yes, it was great.
It
was really
Dynamite Kid's book was also quite good, even though there's a lot of, small-mindedness comes out. It's there's envy and jealousy towards anybody. But at the same time, I can tell you, even though there's lots of things in his book that are really wrong, he's got the facts totally wrong, and it's not what happened, or not the truth.
Yeah.
I can say, for the most part, his book is his book. It's not somebody else taking his book and telling a story. It's him sitting there and talking to someone on tape, and then someone, putting their book together based on what his interviews were.
Right.
But it's one of those books. It's a fascinating book in the sense that it captures what kind of a special talent he was, and at the same time, what a little bitter, little jealous, little small man complex kind of guy that he was. And probably that's why he had the problems that he had. He always thought he was the toughest guy in the world, and he was just a 5'8",
right,
little spark plug of a guy that was taking every kind of steroid imaginable to become a monster. He wanted to be a monster and became a monster, but he was a little man.
Yeah.
In a big man's world, and he definitely left a big footprint for a little guy. But I learned so much. I have so many good things to say about Dynamite. At the same time, I have so many things to say about him that are not.
That's how
but his book does capture him, in my opinion.
I'll have to check that one out then. I'll add that to my list. I have like so many different ones on the shelf. And the funny thing is, Bret, too, I opened your book like as we were talking, and on the photo you were talking about with the ladder match is there. And then right diagonal across it is you putting Leo Burke in an abdominal stretch, so it's right on the photo still. It's the same page, pretty neat too. So pretty cool.
All right, well look, I won't keep you on the phone.
Hey, this is great, Bret. I appreciate you taking the time and everything like that, and I'm happy to talk about Leo. Yeah, oh man, yeah, and I'm happy you did too, and hopefully some people tune into this and learn a lot more about him and what the legacy he's left on you and everybody too that he's worked with. So, amen to that. Yeah, amen to that. Thank you, Bret. I really appreciate it. All right, take care.